and welcome to the Heart of Scrolls podcast. We are back here after a long hiatus. We've been switching time zones, or we've been switching schedules because Smogan, which is our usual host, has been busy and is going to be busy for a while. So you're going to have to stick with me for a little while longer, and I really can't do late Fridays or late Saturdays. So we're trying out this time. We're open to feedback whenever you'd rather want it, but right now this is what we decided on. Uh, yes, my name is Colorplant. I'm today's host for the show, and today's topic is going to be all about balance patches because there's been a balance patch on test server for like about a week now, and it hit live just today. So and there's a lot of interesting stuff to talk about in it, and I think we're going to fill the whole show just talking about balance and how the meta is going to shape after these balance changes, really. And of course, we have guests today, as always. First guest is Atmaz, which is one of our beloved community managers, and also has the best name on Twitch. Hi, Atmaz.
Hi, thanks for having me. I see my webcam looks a little grainy. I don't know what's up with that. I thought it was good, but yeah, thanks for having me. Glad to be here as always.
Hey, thanks for being here. And second up, we have Antirad, which is a fellow Badger member of ours and consistently a top 10 player, and has a lot of tournament wins under his belt. And I adore him. I like him. You guys should too. Welcome, Antirad.
Hello, everyone. It's nice to be here again.
Yeah. And we also have Squiddy with the face of a dog today because he doesn't have a webcam. Is the dude who runs the weekly scroll design competition on the subreddit, and he has ruined the game by inventing taxing, and is known as the guy with too many ideas most of the time. Welcome, Squiddy.
Thank you.
Dog, Jesus. Okay,
it's a doge, not a dog.
It's a doge. Okay, is that how you say it?
Don't look directly at it.
Is it not doggy? It's doge.
Doge.
Okay. Right. So as our first segment, which is what we do every week, is just ask the guest what have you been playing, or have you been doing scrolls related really at all last week? So I'm gonna start with you, Atmaz.
This week, so the live patch just hit today. I played like 2 games with it. Trying out Undead, seeing how that's going now with Anima Conduit backup. What was it, last Sunday? Was that the Black Market Cup? I forget.
Yeah.
We did the playoffs. Yeah, I did the playoffs last Sunday. That was fun. Took so long. I've never been in the playoffs before, but wow, that was like 7 to 8 hours of scrolls. Pretty exhausting at the end of it.
It was pretty long.
And I had to play Puke twice in 2 different matches, so there was that too that got my butt handed to me. And probably after this, I'm probably going to play on the live server some more and see what I can do with the new changes, which I'm sure we'll be talking about.
All right. What about you, Antirad?
I've not been playing too much recently, mostly because I don't have the time, but also because the ranked is pretty dead at this moment. Maybe I shouldn't say that, but you just have to wait so long to get a match that I often just quit after a few minutes because I don't want to wait any longer. But when I do play, I usually just stick to tempo order, and I find it's pretty good still. I think in this meta, the one weakness it has, or maybe it had, because as we will talk about the new balance changes, Curse Decay was nerfed quite a lot. So that's one problem of my head. Maybe I'll play a little more then. But that's pretty much what I've played. Tempo order.
All right. And Squiddy or Doge.
Yeah.
What about you?
I haven't actually played very much on live. I've mostly been on the test server and been testing out the latest changes, both the recent test server patch and the one that was, I think, a week ago or something. And mostly been concerned with balance and just doing various balance suggestions. And that's really it. I'm looking forward to the release, really, because I think that ranked and quick match will have a lot more players. So until then, I'm just doing the trials, which are really fun.
Yeah. All right. So that's it for that segment. We're gonna just move on to balance changes because there's a lot to talk about. And I want to start with energy, first of all. I want to start with the ranged energy kind of nerfs coming with Bombard and Machinated, because you kind of have to treat the ranged energy deck and the Grey Block deck differently. So I'm going to just talk about those changes by themselves. So Bombard now is like adjacent, the tile and adjacent tiles get counted down instead of the whole board. And people are saying that this could be a buff in a way that you don't count your 20 units down as well. But it's also a big nerf in that it doesn't hit the whole board. It really got like the return to nature treatment. Atmaz, I've seen you play a lot of energy. Do you think Bombard is still just as playable, a little bit worse, or just not playable at all?
So it's too early for me to say whether or not it's playable. I haven't actually played it since the patch competitively or against, at ranked or anything like that. But I will say that I like the direction Bombard went. I like scrolls that interact with the hex board in the classic flower fashion, like in Inferno Blast. I like that it takes positioning into account. Whether it was too big of a nerf, I can't judge yet. I need to play around with it, play against people who have it. The argument that it's a buff, I think, is a little strong because, most of the time when you bombard as range energy, you're wiping the board or close to it, right? Like, you're never going to bombard knowing that the opponent is going to shoot you unless you make a mistake. Will that open new scenarios where you can now get away with that? It's hard to say. Is that going to happen very often? But yeah, I guess that's my initial opinion on it. Bombard has been talked about for quite some time. People are saying, step it back now because there's so many range units. I like the change. Whether or not it needs to be adjusted after this, I can't say because the patch just came out today.
I agree fully with Atmaz. I think that it's actually a slight nerf, because like you said, you previously would have basically a board wipe, countdown reduction, and you take out your opponent's range units, so that sort of drawback would never really affect you. Whereas now you have to pay attention to your own unit's positioning and be careful about when you play the bombard. It becomes much harder to play it off properly. But at the same time, because it is a slight nerf to it, you can then, as a developer, introduce stronger range units that with the previous bombard would be too powerful.
So I think now is a good time to talk about power creep, right? Because there's a couple scrolls where power creep is the #1 reason why they've been scaled back with this particular balance patch, right? So power creep, for those who don't know, is when a scroll or it's a card game term usually, where there's some sort of card, let's say, that has a certain ability that is fine with the current content and the current cards that are released. But as more and more cards are released, it becomes more and more powerful. So for Bombard, when it first existed in vanilla beta, there were only a couple range units. There was Scattergunner, Gun Automaton, Cannon Automaton, probably a couple others. But you couldn't fill an entire deck with ranged units. Rebellion came out, a couple more ranged units, Waypoints. So now we're in the situation where you can fill an entire deck with ranged units, and Bombard still remained at 3 cost, the same way it was out day 1 of beta. So that's why cards like Bombard get adjusted over time, and that's why cards like, well, I'm sure later on we'll talk about Elder, get stepped back over time, and in the future, cards like Restless Bones, right? Because right now, you cannot fill an entire deck with undead creatures. There aren't enough scrolls in the game. There's not enough content. So as more content will be released, you'll probably see changes to Restless Bones too.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And there's actually more cards in the current set that we have that will need to be adjusted. One of those is, for example, Caravans of Expanse. It could one day be actually a very good card. Now it's just bad because there's not that many cards that can use the effect. But Bombard got nerfed, got buffed pretty much every set that got released, and I think the tipping point when it went a bit on the too strong side was when Oculus Cannon got introduced, because that was one unit that had very strong synergy with Bombard. And also, one other thing I wanted to maybe touch on is, I wonder how much, because people talk that units or creatures specifically for ranged energy are weak. They have stats that are just a little below the curve, and I wonder how much of that is by design. I wonder how much is because Mojang wanted them to be sort of like a glass cannon faction or a deck subtype, and yeah, and I just have to wonder, if we nerf Bombard now, then do we have to actually buff some other creatures for energy? And yeah.
So range units get around. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Range units get around a few mechanics. You know, spiky. You know, whether or not spiky, look out. But other things too. Like there's a few scrolls that interact only with melee combat, like proximity mine. I don't know. There's others I can't think of. But yeah, so range units are probably deliberately scaled back. You know, that's part of their value, is their range. Now, whether or not it's too much now that Bombard is nerfed, you know, that's all up for discussion.
I mean, if you were to change some of the current range units, and sorry for interrupting you there, Colorplant, I mean, one of the first contenders, I think, would be the Hired Marksman, which with its 3 countdown was probably designed around Bombard being a wide board countdown reduction. And now that they have nerfed Bombard, they might want to take a look at some of those units. Maybe even also that giant automaton, which I've now forgotten the name of. Cannon automaton.
Cannon automaton.
Yeah. So there are some of these old scrolls that I think they could actually buff a little bit now.
Yeah, especially like along the 4+ resource curve, because I think like 1 to 3 resource creatures are actually pretty decent for energy, even if they are ranged. So it's mostly they are lacking on the higher resource curve.
Yeah. I mean, some of them have like piercing and lobber as well, right? So that makes them better in use with buff cards, such as like Machinated, for example.
Yeah, they have strong synergy there.
Yeah, and talking about Machinated, was also nerfed this balance patch. Now instead of giving +1 CD or countdown, it doubles the countdown of the unit it's played on, which basically means that most of the time, like 90% of the time, it's gonna be 4 countdown instead of 3, so you can't bombard directly after and hit with it again. So I think it's still gonna be a run. I think it's still good, but it makes it not unfair, I would say. Seems, at least, my opinion.
Yeah, surviving 1 bombard is very hard, and surviving 2 bombards when 1 unit is machinated is just... It usually ends the game. So I think it's a good nerf. It's not a huge nerf, but it brings the scroll in line.
I had a really good practice match with on NRP right after this patch hit test server, and with Machinated's rather strong drawback, it was very rarely played, and when it was actually played, the opponent had a chance to make sure that Machinated unit didn't attack a second time, because you couldn't double bombard 2 turns in a row, which I think is a good change.
Yeah, you have to.
That was a little. Go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I just wanted to add that usually when you use Machinated, you use it on either a Stormrunner or a Canonetta, so you trade pretty efficiently, usually killing like 2 units, maybe even 3. So the scroll has a huge effect when it comes into play. So I think it should have a drawback.
Yeah, definitely. The drawback is probably big enough now. Probably.
At +1, it was it was so easy. I mean, you've already covered it, but it was so easy to just chain that unit attacking several turns in a row, and or much quicker than you'd think would be reasonable, and you have a 7 damage Storm Runner attacking 2 turns in a row, it's over, or Canonetta. I like what Antirad said about you get so much value from it when you play it. It's probably reasonable to increase the countdown as it was.
Yeah. I was hearing people when they were talking about energy, like on a subreddit, there's some people that's like, Bombard is the problem, and some people are like, no, Machinated is the problem. And so, like, instead of just nerfing one to the ground to the point of unplayable, they nerfed them both slightly to still be good, but not unfair. So I like the way they nerf both those cards. Changed them.
Yeah, I think range energy is still gonna be played and still gonna be good.
Yeah, definitely. Alright, so I want to move on to order cards. I'm gonna do Greylock Elder last because that's what it says in my notes, apparently. Grounds of the Fallen, guys, now only affects humans. Still a lot of humans in the other factions, really, isn't there? There's only like a couple of growth decks that don't play a lot of humans, maybe. Undead, maybe. I don't see a lot of undead on the ladder. I don't know. Could this make this good?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
I actually think that it might be okay. It's not gonna be like a super great scroll to have, but it might be used situationally. I will try it out definitely, especially in tempo order, because I think tempo order can get the most value out of it because it's heavy on the board present early on. So if you have a strong board presence, then usually your opponent, if things are going your opponent is not having too many creatures, so you probably will have more value out of the scroll than your opponent. And also one of the things that tempo order was a little weak against is removal, so this gives it a little more fighting chance versus energy, for example. I think it's actually going to be a decent scroll.
So it's definitely better than it was before. I mean, it's a complete improvement. There's nothing debatable. Like, now it has more situational use. And I see it going in a deck like Antirad was talking about where, I mean, it was already maybe theoretically usable in Once in a Blue Moon, but now you see put in a deck and, oh, you're playing against a Gravelock opponent. Well, GG, they don't get anything from it. Or, an undead heavy decay deck or something like that. Or in general, just playing against growth where beasts and humans are mixed. Like, I could see it getting more useful, whether or not, I mean, I don't see it being a super powerful, oh my god card, but I like that it's improved, and I like seeing scrolls get tiny little improvements like this just to see the effects. Like, I don't think anyone's going to argue like, oh my god, that's too strong now, take that change away. Like, I think for the most part, hey, why not try it, see what the potential is with something like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely stronger, but the problem I have with it is that it kinda works against some of the multi-resource synergies that you might otherwise have. Like, for example, Damning Curse now deals magic damage to your own units. And you could have, before this change, combined it with Grounded Fallen to give your own units immunity to the damage from the Damning Curse. And I like that sort of synergy, even if the developers didn't think about it, because it's those sort of cross-resource combos that would enable multi-resource decks in the future. Whereas now you basically have an order card, because all your units in order is going to be humans mostly.
Yeah, it did pretty much isolate it to order with this change. That is an argument where I guess it's not completely improved then, because you have a point there.
Yeah, I didn't even think about multi-resource use. Or well, I saw Cantor running like a Gojo's kind of deck using this, which was not good at all, but it was fun.
Yeah.
Alright, another order card, buffed Fields of Strife. Now it has the same effect, but lasts 1 turn longer. This is that Crimson Bull effect thing in order that it buffs your units by how many knights you have on the same lane. Is that it?
Yeah,
Yep.
exactly.
So it's max +2 attack to any unit on the field. Now lasts 1 more turn. Still the same cost. I know there was debate about making one cost lower as well in the RC.
Yeah, they were
That didn't
suggesting
happen.
2 order, I think.
Yeah,
To
I
order
think they should
M4.
have done that because I don't think this is gonna be played still at free cost. Because I mean,
Yeah.
knights
Yeah.
are powerful, but you can't rely on having 2 out on the same lane at the
I
same
mean,
time
I
and then
mean,
playing this.
I think
the
it's actually
Overlord has actually said this before, that basically your knights already have all the attack they need, because they lack
Yeah.
traits like Relentless that allows them to use that extra attack efficiently. So it kind of becomes overkill when you can use this scroll slot for something to move away your units and hit the idols directly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's gonna probably stay where it is, when it is not played right now. So I guess one way to get value out of it is if you make a deck with squires and then skirmishers get the attack buff. But that's
It's like you
I
better
played.
play focus, right?
Yeah, it's not gonna be a very common occurrence. I think that the scroll is not terrible, but I just think there might be some better choices.
I do like the approach they're taking, though, just increasing the linger amount by 1 or 2, tweaking the costs on a lot of these changes, actually, because it's easier to just test it on live then, and we can then in a couple of months probably do another revision, and it maybe reduce its cost to 2, and that would make it easier to combo with squires and soldier decks.
Yeah, I mean, it shows that they're recognizing there are scrolls that nobody's using. They're not good. They recognize that and they're like, okay, well, let's try something with it. Does it work? Is it good enough yet? No? Okay, well, we'll try something again next patch or something like that. So another one of those little small improvements that might push it over the edge. But with this one, yeah, I kind of agree. I don't think it will be good enough yet to see serious competitive play.
Yeah. They did that with a lot of lingering spells, just increasing the length of like 1 turn. A lot of them, even 2 turns.
Yeah, it's probably the easiest way you can buff them.
Yeah, I mean it's easy, but I'm not sure if it's the best way to buff them.
Yeah, sometimes.
Because like, even if a bad effect lasts for 10 turns, it's still a bad effect. Not saying all the lingering spells are bad, but I'm saying that's
The
how it
thing
is with
is,
some of
though,
them.
we're mostly thinking about this from a competitive perspective, and that kind of makes sense as most of us are more experienced players. But these slight buffers might be helpful in the judgment format. And I think that's something that you should keep in mind when it comes to any scroll change. For example, in Hearthstone, whenever there's a new card released or there's a balance change, pretty much every reviewer will think about the card in relation to ranked, as well as the arena format. But the difference there is, of course, that arena is so much more popular in Hearthstone, whereas judgment here is barely played by anyone. But if it was played by more people, then it might be worthwhile taking a look at these scroll changes with judgment in mind.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. Although I have to say that a lot of the scrolls, the lingering scrolls, actually kind of require you to build a deck around them. Like, even if you buff the Grounds of the Fallen, or sorry, not Grounds of the Fallen, the Fields of Strife even more, it still requires you to have basically a Knight deck, and you're not gonna get a Knight deck in Judgment, right? And that's the case with scrolls like Clandestine Orchard. So I think that's a reasonable point you make, but with some of the scrolls that get buffed, it doesn't really apply.
Like
Yeah,
Greybog
that's
Burrows as well. Yeah, like there's a lot. You're very right. Like I agree that a lot of changes do affect judgment in really cool and fun ways. This one though, probably not because of it being really situational, which is one of the reasons why it's not very popular.
Yeah, I'm thinking about Soul Scrounger, because I know that that's a buff and a card that most people probably will never play in ranked. But when thinking about it, I think it might be really helpful in the Judgment, actually, being at just 2 decay, because it's so much easier to splash into in a multi-resource deck. So yeah, I mean, I think a lot of these cards will be useful in the Judgment.
Yeah, that's
Soul
a good
Scrounger
point.
for sure.
Alright, to the next order card that's been buffed a lot. It's Banner of Ordnance. Now is still the same stats, but instead of destroying itself and counting down. No, wait, it's the resonance effect. It was before. Now it destroys itself upon 0 countdown, or you can destroy it with a button. And it also heals adjacent units for 1, which healing now cures poison. So not only don't you have to play several spells to kill a lingering spell, but you can just sacrifice it after 2 turns, or is it 1 countdown now? Is it still 2?
I think it's
It's
2.
I think
countdown.
it's 1.
It says
I'm not
1
sure.
in the patch, but they might have changed
Yeah,
that.
okay. Well,
Check.
that's even better then, because you can just kill the lingering spell the next turn and heal stuff if they're poisoned. So
It's got 2 countdown.
I think
Yeah,
it was
okay.
supposed to be 1, but it's 2.
Yeah.
And when I tested it earlier, it was 2. So I'm not sure if that was a last minute intended thing or what.
Yeah, maybe this just slipped by. At 2 countdown, I don't actually think it's gonna be played. Even at 1 countdown, I'm not convinced that it's gonna be that great. The main problem with Banner, it's obviously a scroll that costs 1, so it can't be that great. But the main problem with it is that you can't remove the lingering spell immediately. You need to wait 1 turn or 2 turns, unless you want to spend a Blessing of Haste or something, but that's 2 cards, and that's probably not gonna happen too often. So your opponent is going to get some value at least from his spell, and that's probably the biggest thing that prevents Banner being good, I think.
yeah.
I actually think that because it now removes poison, it might actually be helpful because it has that sort of versatility that a lot of Order scrolls have, where you can use them defensively, you can kind of use them offensively, in this case, destroying your opponent's lingering spell.
Yeah, that's true.
And, I mean, just because of that, and it's still, I think, 1 order, so it becomes a really cheap kind of multi-tool structure. You can use it as a wall, you can use it to heal your units, you can use it to remove poison from your units, and then remove lingering spells. So because it has so many uses in this 1 scroll, it might be actually playable, especially if now people start running the new energy, the Gravelock Burrows, which Gravelock decks might do.
The issue with it, I think, still might be the value of it. So in order to get equal value from the banner, you'll have to play it. And let's say you want to play it the same turn, there's a lingering spell you want to get rid of. You'll have to play it, play a cooldown reduction, and heal a poison from one of your units to equal 2 for 2 trade, right? But you can argue against that by saying the versatility of it, like you were saying, does that make it, in certain situations worth it? I don't know. I think this is one where they're still playing around or searching for ways to see good ways to encourage lingering removal without it being the same thing every time. Destroy lingering, draw a scroll. Destroy lingering, gain a resource. So it's hard to find a good solution for that, I think. And I think this probably won't be the final one for this scroll. At least that's how I feel after seeing it. But I mean, it remains to be seen. It's brand new. So.
Yeah, Kratstash actually made a comment in chat that I think he just values the sacrifice itself quite highly because he can fit it in his late game order deck, just putting power bounds and heritages, which is a good point.
You can also tempo theft it.
Yeah, with power bound heritage.
It would increase the power of those decks, because normally you just play it on a Zealot anyway, right? And you might not always get a kill with him anyway, so yeah.
Yeah. Alright, should we move on to probably the most hated change, the Bloodline and Curse Present change? Basically the change to Curse Decay at the moment. People are saying Curse Decay is dead.
The death of Scrolls. This change killed Scrolls. Variant.
Killed Scrolls. Even worse than taxing.
It's way worse than taxing. They should have put taxing on Bloodline Taint, just to seal the coffin. Right.
That would have been hilarious.
Taxing 10.
Alright, but is Curse Decay dead? Is it never gonna happen anymore? Is Bloodline Taint so bad now that it's just not gonna see play? Do we not have any better Curse cards available at all?
I mean, not
So-
really. I mean, I'm just going to say this quickly, but basically, Bloodline Taint was essentially a Quake or a Thunder Surge that Decay had access to, which is pretty huge because a lot of their creatures play off death. You could put down the Bloodline Taint, Baleful Witch combo, and set off your Harvesters, and clear the board, which is even better because their units are so slow and take time to actually contest for the board. So, yeah, it's definitely a huge nerf. Even if it isn't technically a nerf, because it's just half the cost and then half the curse. But that sort of Quake Thunder Surge potential is now gone, basically.
It's the same thing, but you need one more card for the combo, and that's... One more card is pretty significant when it comes to combos.
So the
the
technical value of it is the same, like exactly like you're saying. It's exactly cut in half. But that's not saying it's improved. It's different now, and it definitely is less strong in those situations. You have to spend an extra scroll. So I think it's safe to say it's nerf. But does it mean Curse Decay is dead? First of all, what is Curse Decay? I think what it means is that I guess what my feelings of it is that it's still runnable in a Decay deck. Does it have to be called Curse Decay? I think it's still a really good card. It's been stepped back a bit. Is it too much? I don't know. I don't think so. But we'll have to see how it plays out. There's a lot of other changes that happened along with this. And for instance, like at 2 cost is really cheap. You can curse an entire subtype for 2 cost. And against a lot of decks, that's a pretty big deal. Every single faction, you can usually hit the majority of the units on board, or at least half of them, for 2 cost and curse 1. And if you kill 1 unit with that extra curse, the Bloodline Taint is going to continue to give you value throughout the rest of the game, right? Curse doesn't go away. It's going to be there. So it's still a good card. It's not as good as it was. And I think people are crying the sky is falling a little bit too much on this one. But it is, I will agree, a nerf to the scroll.
I actually think that it's a better card in a wider variety of Decay decks. Because with the 4-cost Bloodline Taint, you basically had to run something to trigger off that Bloodline Taint curse, either Infectious Blight or the Baleful Witch. Whereas now you can make use of it with the Relentless Undead units. You can use it with just all Brain Lice and then rely on combat damage. But you can also do interesting multi-resource decks, since 2 Decay is kind of easy to splash into. So I like the potential here with the reduction in cost.
Yeah, I think I don't know. Like, I'm not going to try to say that I'm sad about this change, because, to be honest, like, Bloodline Taint was the most hated scroll of mine for the entire.
As an order player.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Actually, I think the first message or post I made on Reddit, on the Scrolls Reddit, was a rant about Bloodline Taint, and in anticipation of the Baleful Witch, which got released in Waypoints, right? Not in Waypoints, in Rebellion. So yeah, but I still think that Bloodline Taint is a decent card when it gets comboed with Poison, because its effect will basically be doubled. So your Poison will be twice as effective as it normally would be. The place where it hurts the most, I think, is the synergy with Baleful Witch, and perhaps that is a place where some buffs could be made. Maybe Baleful Witch could be buffed a little bit. And another thing is that I think a lot of people are kind of sad about this change, because Decay doesn't really have anywhere to go after this. Curse Decay was the most prevalent deck for Decay, and basically when you nerf it, you kind of nerf the entire faction in a way. So I think a good development would be if we get some other deck archetypes for decay, like we maybe get the creature decay or watcher decay, watcher get decay, getting played on the ladder and being competitive again. That's what I would like to see.
I think the
and
Brainwise at 3 decay will help that a lot. Because the
Yeah,
previous
definitely.
Watcher gets really needed that 3 cost removal. So we might see a return of those decks.
Yeah, having
And
Brainless
also-
back at 3 just feels good. Just seeing it free again. It just
Also-
works the curve out much better and makes Cursemonger really good again. Does it?
One funny thing is that Cluster Hex is still 3 cost, which was pointed out in chat, and I think when we bring down Bloodline Taint into 2 cost range, then we should do the same with Hex marks, and maybe then the Curse Decay archetype can still do well.
Cluster Hex, not Hex marks, right?
The Hex Marks could use a buff.
Yeah, sorry, I always confuse those, yeah. Cluster Hex.
But I mean, Cluster X could potentially get more value than Bloodline Taint.
Yeah, you have to be careful there.
Potentially.
You have to be
Yeah.
careful. Like, I wonder with that, is it better to raise the cost and increase the curse with that scroll? I don't know. You have to be careful. Cluster X is basically, like I think Mon said, it was the baseline curse spell, the first one they made, and they based everything off of the value of Cluster Hex.
Yeah,
So it's also a common, isn't it? I forget.
I
Yeah.
think it is.
I
pretty
think
sure
so,
it's
yeah.
common.
And that's kind of relevant when you think about Judgment. If that was more powerful, and then as equal as available as it is now in Judgment, you would kind of potentially make Decay even stronger in that mode. But fortunately, no one plays Judgment, so we don't really have to worry about that.
Yeah. Problem solved.
Alright, let's move on to some other decay buffs actually. Anima Conduit got 1 more health. And I remember I kept saying when I saw Anima Conduit, this would be so good if it just had 1 more health. It would be amazing to have 1 more health. And I think it is amazing now. I think this is going to be run in most decay decks.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of value to just what are they called? The Revenants killing
Yeah.
themselves and
I'd like to see
synergizing
that, yeah.
generally
I mean,
with Wild
warded-
Eaters and
Warded
Harvesters.
Undead Revenants with 1
Yeah.
countdown. That is crazy value.
This is probably
Yeah.
my favorite.
I don't think the
change.
ward's gonna count that much because you mostly spawn them like the turn you attack and then they attack on your own turn. So I don't think the ward's gonna count for too much at all, unless you use a lot of removal. Like against growth, that's not gonna count much. But against growth, we also have Festering Freak now, which got stats buffed. Plus
It's
1 attack,
actually
plus 1
playable
health.
now.
Is it? I've
I
played
think
around
it
with
is,
it on
to be
tests. I'm still not a fan, but I mean, it's like a good judgment card now, at least, right?
Yeah, it was always kind of okay-ish in Judgment. It wasn't great,
Yeah.
but it was okay because there was no reliable way to remove it. So you ended up just hitting it and getting poisoned.
And it kind of has the same problem Spiky has, right? Like it's melee combat only, so ranged always just destroyed it. But now that range got stepped back a bit, is it going to be able to see more play? I don't know. I like that it was changed.
I mean, it might. There's a lot of growth on ladder right now, and I think that's not gonna go away for some time. So, Festering Freak is kind of like a meta counter card.
Yeah,
There's a
I
lot
mean,
of
when
melee.
growth is up there, you switch it in for
Yeah.
some other 3 cost. When growth is not at the top, you switch it out again.
Yeah. And there is like a room in the free cost spot in the K now that Lightbearer got nerfed the
Definitely.
forecast. So, like, I've been mostly switching out with Our Heart's Disciple, and you could either switch it out with that or Festering Freak now, depending on the meta. Whatever else free costs the K has.
Yeah.
Mood
I
of
do
fighter.
think that Decay needs a solid 3-drop other than what they have now, because now they have Rot Eater, which is great. It gets burned, but overall it's a very good creature. And they have Harvester, which is also great, but it's not a very good play early on. So TK kind of struggles with the early curve. They don't have
They
that many.
need to be careful though, because Rot Eater and Harvester are really solid creatures.
They are very good, yes. But like you had Rot Eater at, I mean not Rot Eater, the poison guy that got nerfed.
Blightbearer.
Blightbearer. Yeah, he was at 3 cost and he was one of the best creatures in the game.
He was.
You can't really argue with it, but on the other hand, TK does have some other mechanics that make them just attack a little slower. They don't have any counter reduction, so I think it kind of balanced it out. So
I've seen Blinky suggest that the Muda Fighter should be turned into a 3-cost 3/2/4 vanilla without anything.
yeah, I would actually
like that a lot.
I'd like to see Decay with a 3-drop 4 health unit that's not a Harvester that counts down on its own. I think that would be a big difference.
And something that is vanilla would be even better.
Yeah, more vanilla creatures. Like, I don't feel like we have a really good idea of what like the stat base line is. If you know what I'm saying. Like, Urva used to be like a 4/5 and then got down to 2/4, and I was confused to how they figured that out, how stats should be seen. So like, I want more vanilla creatures just to see how to balance it out. But then people are gonna say like, oh shit, that card's so bad compared to Sister of the Bear, which is a 4/4, right?
Yeah,
And people
there's a lot
want
of
Sister
gaps.
the Bear to have all sorts of weird mechanics to make up for it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I like vanilla.
There's all sorts of gaps to fill with just vanilla, and the thing is, every card can't be vanilla, right? It'd also be pretty boring. So
Yeah, of course.
it sucks to wait for another expansion, but it's probably what's going to have to happen with that.
Yes. Alright, let's move on to growth now. First, what I want to talk about is Seed of Insurgency. Got down from 5 to 4. I think this card is really good now. I think this is going to see a lot of play.
Mhm.
Is anyone disagreeing with me?
No.
that's the one that resummons the unit, right?
Yeah, on one
At
countdown.
One countdown.
Yeah.
So basically, it's a haste when your opponent kills it during their turn.
Yeah, it might be playable, maybe. I don't know.
I think this is amazing. I think this is one of the best things that had happened to growth in a while.
It might be the sleeper, like, oh my gosh, this is way too good type thing.
Because at 4 costs, you can now play it at a much wider range of growth creatures, like the Earthborn Mystic, the Wetland Ranger, the Relentless Fang Bear, whatever it's called. And it's now, because it also counts them down, it's a net positive. In addition to working as a blocker, essentially, like Shroud of Unlife or Ilthorn Seed.
Yeah, I mean, Witch Doctor is a really good card because you can't get through to the Witch Doctor even if he moves down after you and you attack first because he spawns stuff in front. Now you just use this on the Great Wolf you have in front and you can move down where you otherwise would have had to stay up to not die to the opponent's creatures.
Yeah.
So it's great for positioning, it's great for being aggressive. And now that it's 4, you can use it on like Wetland Rangers, Bears, Great Wolves, and still get value. As in, you didn't pay more than you paid for the creature to get the creature again, and it has like a built-in Blessing of Haste even. So I think this card is pretty cray right now. Pretty cray.
I'm a little scared of it, to be honest.
Yeah.
But
I'm a little scared at 4. That was.
I mean,
But
basically,
what I'm even more
does-
scared of.
I'm just going to finish this. Basically, what it says now is pay 4 growth, resummon your Great Wolf. Summon a Great Wolf when this unit dies, essentially. And when you think it in those sort of terms, it's pretty damn good. Like, I would play it even without the countdown reduction. Because that Great Wolf now is 10 hate points worth of wall that your opponent has to get through.
Yeah. And just the thing that you can move down to, like, threaten your opponent and having this as a failsafe is just great. Because positioning matters a lot, and taking control of the middle, not being like pushed into like the upper or lower lanes, because then you're gonna lose. I mean, this is great. But what I'm even more scared of is the new junkyard. Dude. It's gonna...
You think
Imagine
so?
having triple junkyard, playing Rat King, you get 3, 4, 5s, I think. It's pretty hard
Yeah.
to deal with.
Yeah, rat decks are coming.
I
Rat
don't
decks are
like it
definitely
though
coming.
in the Rat meta, the Rat Cup format, because you can no longer do the unforeseen onslaught Rat combo because of the junkyard increasing the attack above 1.
Well, you can. You
You just
just
have to choose.
yeah.
Yeah,
You can't
but-
run junkyards.
The Rat meta just got advanced. It got harder to play. Well, yeah, people are saying this might even be OP. I've seen some people say that. Could this be run just...
Nah,
With rat- I mean,
maybe.
The only good rat card is Rat King, right?
Yeah,
Basically, the health buff doesn't really matter in Scrolls, because you take them down to 1 HP and then get rid of that junkyard, and all your rats go poof.
Yeah.
So I think variable health boosts kind of don't matter. Basically, what junkyard does now is give +1 attack. That's how I'm kind of interpreting it. Which is a decent effect, but not game-breaking.
I think structures that do nothing but give a variable health boost are less valuable because they're just a dinky little wall. Whereas with Elder, I mean, we just might as well specifically talk about Elder. Elder is a unit that does things and attacks and moves around and also gives a variable health boost. So I think it's hard to say that variable health boosts in general suck in Scrolls.
yeah, but then you have Gravelocks, which kind of are pretty good with the health buff. So
Yeah,
I think
that's-
you cannot underestimate it. I think it's. I agree with you that you can kill the junkyard, but you can also probably protect it in some ways. I think it's a definite buff. I don't know if rat decks will actually be playable in the high rankings. I don't think so, but
I hope not.
yeah. Actually, what I was thinking about is that instead of the attack bonus, they maybe, because the health bonus was always there, right? Or was it the attack
Yeah.
bonus?
It was
Yeah.
Health bonus was
Yes.
always there.
I was actually thinking if they could make Junkyard into sort of a rat forge, so that it could count down, and then once in 3 turns, for example, it would just pop out a rat out of it. I think
That would be really good.
pretty
like a
pretty
Nognest
cool.
or like permanent, like it stays and continues to pop
Yeah,
out?
like a forge. It would stay on the
Oh,
field.
Forge. Okay.
I mean, Forge
That'd be
is
cool.
a 3 cost with 5 health
Yeah,
that pumps up Automaton every other turn. So I think you could probably do something like that.
yeah, maybe. I mean, it's just a thought. I thought it would be fun, but I don't know if it's gonna happen. Probably not.
You definitely have to increase the cost and completely rework it, but it would be
Yeah.
fun. Yeah.
Alright, we have a lot of time yet, so let's move on to the last growth scroll at least I want to talk about. It's Fjords of Vigor, which has been kicking people out of games today, I've heard.
Should not be happening
good.
now. If it is, you should be up in arms, but that should be solved.
Alright. Fjords of Vigor used to give enchanted creatures +1 attack, was a lingering spell. It is still a lingering spell, but it now gives creatures that cost 3 or less mana +1 attack. Right? Am I correct in that?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Good.
Just have to-
I think this is really good in a growth aggro deck. Just having... There's a lot of creatures under 3 cost. Really. There's a lot of them. And they're all...
I mean, this basically replaces the Wetland Ranger in some aggro growth decks. Because most of your growth weenies will cost 3 or less. And then you might as well just play Fjords of the Vigor and have that buff from turn 2, instead of having to wait to turn 5 for that buff to come into effect. Or you can use both.
Yeah. I think this is gonna make some people start running Earthborn Keeper. I've seen him run a little bit in like other decks already, but not seen him with too much potential. But Fjords of Vigor makes him like at least an Eager Scryer when he comes out, and you're gonna play a creature every turn, at least one creature in growth,
Yeah.
right? So it's gonna be at least a 2/3 for 3 2/1/3 for 3. So that's pretty good. It's a pretty good creature. One
he's
countdown is
pretty
significant.
decent.
It's
Yeah,
basically a
so-
Mega Brave. 3 costs for 3 health.
Yeah, exactly. And that means if you have Fjords of Vigor
Yeah.
on the field, but that's also gonna buff your other creatures, so you still get value even if you don't have him. I think this would see play in aggro decks, not in like mid game or late game decks,
Not
but
definitely
in
not.
decks that go up to like 5 cost potentially.
This I think is going to make the aggro growth decks even stronger. And
Yeah.
actually, I'm wrong. I think earlier I said that Seed of Insurgency was the scariest card. I think this might be the scariest change to me.
If we had the old Grave Drool, you could actually use this in one of your Gravelock decks. And basically buff almost all of your Gravelocks, except for the Elder and the Freak.
And
Which could come in handy.
actually, you would just buff 3, I think, Gravelocks.
Oh yeah,
Because
Guard,
there's...
Outcast, Raider.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
those are the 3.
Well, you could run Gravehawk. Oh man. Right, talking about Gravelocks and all that, Gravelock Elder now only gives +1 health instead of +1 attack and +1 health, thank God. And the Gravelock Burrows has now been changed to Ninja 4. When a Gravelock you control is dealt damage, your other Gravelocks get +1 attack until end of your turn. So, Gravelock Burrows stack, so whenever something takes damage, all other things get +1 attack. So if you Infernal Blast yourself, you could potentially get +7 attack on all your Gravelocks. And I think it's cool how they worked it, because now you can like plan out how much you need to damage your own Gravelocks to make the other ones attack as
Yeah.
much as you need to. I think it's a more interesting card now, definitely, than it was
definitely.
before. It was
Yeah.
just like a +2 attack on death, and now you can play with it and play around it. It's
The
I like
previous
it. I like it.
the previous Gravelock Burrows wasn't used at all, right? So, and I think
Yeah.
the reason why it was buffed is obviously because Elder was stepped back. So, I think like my overall, I've said this before, but my initial feeling about Gravelocks after this is that Gravelocks are going to be stepped back in power just a tiny bit, but they're going to be so much more fun to play because of Burrows.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think
I
this
would
is a more
agree.
fun card. Even if it is slightly weaker, and Gravelocks as a whole was slightly weaker, they will be a lot more fun. And that is really helpful when it comes to drawing in new players. Because you'll have these crazy plays that might go up on YouTube's or streams, which, you know, new players like seeing. They like seeing these crazy combos. So I think it's a good change.
Yeah, definitely. I think I think the Gravelock Burrows is one huge experiment. To be honest, I'm not sure if anyone can say for sure if it's going to be overpowered or underpowered at this moment, because I've heard people say both, and I can't really make up my mind. I think it's gonna have a good place in Gravelock decks now, and honestly, I think the removing the attack buff from the Elder was coming, and it had to be done. I think there was just too much synergy in Gravelock decks
definitely.
from one card.
We talked about power creep earlier, and he's the perfect example of
Yeah.
power creep.
Yeah.
Mm.
With every new
Alright.
Gravelock, he became so much more powerful. So now they're stepping him back in power. They can continue to introduce new Gravelock cards, which is good.
Yeah, definitely. Alright, we're approaching the end of the stream. Let's have a little quick lighting round with what do you think the meta is gonna look like after this? What is the meta gonna shape as? What are the different factions going to play? Atmaz, what do you think?
Start with me. So, I think growth. I mean, overall, if you look at the changes across the board, growth stronger. Got the best changes. There wasn't really any nerfs to growth at all, were there? So growth only got stronger. You're going to see a lot of aggro decks with Fjords of Vigor. As for everything else, I think it's the most difficult to predict. I think is ranged energy. I don't know how good that's going to be. I'm going to try it out myself. It's the hardest one to predict for me. Decay, I think Undead Decay will be fun to play around with. Undead Decay is my favorite type of Decay. I hope it's a lot better now with Anima Conduit. Hard to say. And as for the other faction, Order. So Order really wasn't touched too much, other than a few cards that I really don't see entering play that much. There's also some cards we didn't talk about, but they're fairly...
Yeah, we didn't talk about all the cards. I basically picked the ones I think is the most... matter the most, really.
Right. So if I were to sum up what I would think is that I think there's going to be a lot of aggressive growth decks, and I think the meta is going to shift to compensate for that, and it'll be cool to see.
All right, Antirad, what do you think?
Yeah, I kind of think the same. I think growth definitely will see an increase in play right now, and I'm kind of wondering which way Decay will go, because right now we are nerfing one archetype and then something will have to replace it, because I wouldn't want Decay just to disappear from the ladder, and I'm wondering if it is going to be undead, or is it going to be creature decay, or maybe someone will make curse decay work still, or poison decay. It's kind of unknown to me at this point. I think range energy is still going to be played. It's going to be good, and Gravelocks should still be available. And as for Order, I think, like Atmaz said, it didn't change too much. I think one change that might affect it is actually just the nerf that Curse Decay got, because Tempo Order is suddenly left without its biggest threat to it, potentially. So I think it may be a little more viable.
And the Overlord is insisting that we mention Banner of Ordnance and its significance for late game Order decks.
Yeah,
it's good. It's good. I like it.
I'd like to see that.
We did talk about it, didn't we?
We did.
Yeah, we
talked, I think.
Yeah, right. Okay, Squiddy, your thoughts on the upcoming meta?
Yeah, I actually think that Tempo Order will be at the very top, because the nerfs to Decay are, as Antirad pointed out, making Order indirectly stronger. And while some Gaggro decks, or Growth Aggro decks, will creep up to the very top with Fjords of the Vigor, that card will be a hindrance versus the Order decks, because they have a lot of 3 costs that will benefit from that extra attack. So overall, I think Tempo Order will be at the top, closely followed by Gaggro, and then Energy Ranged, Gravelocks. I don't know which one of them will be stronger. I'm leaning towards Gravelocks at the moment, but it might change, with Decay at the very bottom.
Alright.
And that's basically all I'm expecting.
Well, if Decay's at the top, everyone can complain at Squiddy's. Alright guys, that is the end of the show today. I want to plug the Scrolls Guide Open Tournament happening this weekend. Registration ends Friday. I don't know when Friday, probably just midnight at one point. And this
10 p.m. CET,
itself,
I think.
Okay, and the tournament itself is happening on Saturday and Sunday. And it's gonna be streamed, and it's gonna be a really big production value. Like, there's gonna be sideboard decks. People are gonna talk about the decks before the matches, and there's gonna be good commentators, good streamers, and I think it's gonna be the best tournament we've seen so far. I'm gonna play in it. I hope you will too, because I hope this is good, could get as big as possible. The prize is a framed artwork, actually, of the new Ducal Skirmisher art that is now up on live, and it's like 150k gold as well. So definitely register for that if you have the possibility to play this weekend. And if you don't have the possibility to play, I would advise you to watch, because it's going to be a lot of fun. Definitely.
I think the best thing about it, like you said, is the production behind it and all the people getting together to cast the games and talk about the decks in between matches. Like, we have a lot of good tournaments, but this is, like, I think, going to be the best one as far as coverage. So it'll be fun to watch.
Yeah, and that matters a lot. All right. Thank you to our guests Atmaz, Antirad, and Squiddy. You have all been wonderful. I think this was a good cast. Definitely. And also thanks to Ice Cream for dealing with technical stuff. Couldn't have done this without you. And thank you to all of our watchers on Twitch right now, and all of our viewers on YouTube. Also on iTunes we have now. We're getting out there. We're doing stuff. Alright, and that should be the end of the show, guys. Go play some Scrolls. Have fun.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.